So let me just, go into our session a little bit. I thought, this is a great follow-up session in a way, after yesterday's great discussion around challenges in the regional views, on the challenges in the repository landscape. And we will, in this session, we will try and address the topic of repository assessment frameworks and the criteria. And we will talk about the players in setting such criteria and requirements in this field. They could be international or national level, but they all have an impact. They all affect, the way we define our repository services, our infrastructure choices, and even the capacity development needs in our organizations. So we will just, discuss the benefits and the challenges to meet, such criteria. We have 4, fantastic speakers today with us, and I'm hoping, their stories will just trigger our own questions, answers or comments on the topics, and this will help us to have a discussion around some of the points made in those talks. Without further ado, let's start the session. I will actually call our first speaker, Gail Steinhart from Cornell University. Gail has been an active voice in this area. She has been actively actually contributing also in developing COAR community framework for good practices in repositories. And she will give us an overview on the topic, as well as I assume some of the capturing current situation in US. Gail, it's all yours. I will just stop sharing my screen.
Hey, good morning. Thank you, Ilkay and Kathleen. It's great to have an opportunity to help set the stage for this session, and I really look forward to hearing what my colleagues have to say. There has been an awful lot of activity around defining good practice in repositories, and recently a lot of that activity has been focused on data repositories. So that'll be the focus of a lot of what I say today, but I think we'll find there's crossover in applicability of some of the criteria that are being put out there, as well as, a lot of us manage general purpose repositories that host data and other kinds of content. So we have the full set of concerns in mind in doing our work. I'm Open Scholarship Services librarian at Cornell, but I'm also a repository manager. So I'll bring that perspective to it. So as I said, there's a lot of activity in this area, a lot of sets of criteria or rubrics being developed. This has been going on for a while. And so I just wanted to point out this paper from Houston et al. In 2017. They took a look at rubrics from several different sources, recommendations, and also certification rubrics. And they found fairly widespread overlap in criteria in those rubrics, but not anything that they were comfortable calling a consensus about what it takes to manage a good data repository. Since then, and it hasn't been all that long, some of the rubrics they looked at have merged or evolved into new ones. New ones have appeared, as have new requirements to share data and other research outputs. So taking maybe a more current look at this, here's a list of about 8 relatively current rubrics, almost all of them aimed at defining good practices for data repositories in particular. Not all of them are specific to data, but most of them. And there are probably others that are not listed here, but this is plenty to make the point that there's a lot of activity in this area. So what's going on? Why so much interest? Why are all these different communities putting forth different yet similar rubrics? I'm going to take a subset from the preceding list, and I'm also going to add to this list the FAIR data principles, maybe as a reference point that against which I can compare some of the other current rubrics. Granted, the FAIR data principles are aimed at promoting reusability and desirable characteristics of an individual data set, but I think they're still a good kind of a benchmark for some of these other rubrics. So FAIR is about data reusability. In the United States, the National Institutes of Health have put out a rubric for repositories to help authors choose a repository, ideally one that promotes FAIR data practices. Publishers have done different things in recent years, from developing a list of specific recommended repositories to developing more general rubrics that allow authors a little bit more choice. And Kathleen noted yesterday the interest of publishers in controlling the open access narrative. And I think it's reasonable to be concerned about publishers also wanting to take control of where research data goes, as some of them start to de-emphasize the business of traditional publishing and look for other business opportunities. But their stated purpose is to develop more consistent guidance for authors. COAR Trust Seals a certification scheme that aims to harmonize multiple certification requirements that are out there. And then again, of course, this community, COAR, has put out last year a global framework for good practice for repositories around the world. It's a general purpose framework. So looking across these purposes, I'd say that, you know, the emergent themes are consistency in practice and helping authors or researchers select where to put their content. The irony that a desire for consistency has led to more and more rubrics is probably not lost on any of us. So let me take a very high level view, like a comparison of 4 of those criteria or rubrics, comparing them to FAIR. Please don't get lost in the details of this slide. I just want you to see the emerging pattern. So on the left-hand side, I have the FAIR data criteria, and then 4 columns for COAR Trust Seal, COAR, publishers, and NIH. And the pattern that, well, also I'll say this is less rigorous than the Houston paper. It's difficult to map these criteria to one another because they're often defined differently, but it's more recent. So I have that advantage. But the pattern that I really want you to see is that there's a fairly widespread agreement and a few gaps. And then of course, these 4 community rubrics beyond FAIR had additional criteria in them not encompassed by FAIR. This is not an exhaustive list. Again, I just want to illustrate a pattern that, these rubrics, which originate in different communities, have overlapping but sometimes slightly different concerns. So a lot of overlap, but perhaps a few more gaps in this area. Let's see now. So where's their universal agreement across all of these? There's universal agreement that persistent identifiers are important and essential even. Rich metadata is important. Standards, although the details may vary from rubric to rubric, standards are important. Clear licensing is important, not necessarily open licensing, but clear licensing important was consistent. Continuity of service, also consistent. And curation as a service was also consistent, which took me a little bit by surprise. I value it highly. I think we probably all do, but it can be a bit of a challenge, especially for generalist repositories. Not surprisingly, given the varied origins of these rubrics, there are also gaps. These gaps, I think, include some items that might be difficult for some repositories to implement, but I think one could have a pretty lively debate as to whether or not that makes those repositories unsuited for doing the jobs that they do. I think there's room for debate there. I want to call out 3 of these just as an example of interesting criteria that may or may not be widely implemented and may or may not be widely accessible to present day repositories. The first one, detailed provenance information. I think probably everyone would agree that that's incredibly useful information to have, whether you're talking about curatorial provenance, the actions that a researcher or a curator take when they collect, create, organize, check, and clean a data set. But then there's also, I guess I'll call it machine provenance, what happens to content once it's in a repository, the checksum that's determined upon ingest, records of who uploaded something and when, records of whether or not something's been replaced or metadata has been edited. All of that's incredibly useful information, but both of types that can be challenging to record. And I would argue that even well-respected, heavily used repositories are not necessarily currently equipped to provide all of that in the detail that we might like. Metrics and reuse tracking also important. Download information is notoriously difficult to compile reliably. And then, of course, citation or tracking reuse is the gold standard for understanding the impact that research outputs have. And certainly repositories are taking a critical step in the right direction by assigning persistent identifiers that enable that tracking. Whether individual repositories have the capabilities then to follow that trace and present it back publicly is another question. And I'm not sure that's something that we should expect all repositories to support. Of course, it is a really important function. That one's absent from Core Trust Seal, I'll mention. Anonymous review only appears in the publisher's rubric. I thought that was sort of interesting. I think most repository systems don't have much, if any, peer review system built into them at all, let alone an anonymous one, although they might support a simpler approval or review workflow. Fortunately for us, I think the Core Notify project is positioned to help address this in a way that makes sense for our widely distributed network. So lots of criteria expressed across lots of rubrics, some agreement, some gaps, and I want to say this is not a paid endorsement. COAR, I think this community really shines in the area of identifying some of the key issues and then advancing the service and technology agenda around it. So I think that leaves us with just acknowledging that this is not a new landscape. This has been going on for a long time. By and large, these criteria are helpful. Even when they're aspirational, they can help push us in the right direction. But some of them currently are quite challenging. And I would argue some of those challenges are more significant for generalist repositories than specialist repositories. And yet generalist repositories, they play an absolutely critical role in serving data and other content that may not neatly fit elsewhere or not even be accepted elsewhere. So I think it's just incumbent on this community to keep participating in these conversations as they unfold. I know here in the United States, a lot of us commented on the recent criteria put out by the Office of Science, Technology and Policy. So we just need to keep doing that and keep advocating for the absolutely essential role that our generalist repositories play in the research landscape. And I will stop there.
Thank you, Gail. That was a great overview, and that was a good call for the community, to watch out and raise the voice, to say what we need to say about these different rubrics. That was a great also to see the patterns between those. I'm just checking the chat box. There is no comments or question at the moment, or nobody actually is raising hands, but shall I just give us, okay, Andras raised you. Okay, please go ahead.
Yeah. Hello.
Hello, Andras.
Some comments. I believe that, well, I am a repository manager as well. And as probably most of us, we are under-resourced. So I think for us to comply with those even more complex criteria, we would need certain help. I mean, for a general repository, most of us would use some kind of open source ready-made software like DSpace or ePrints or whatever. So my point is that if the community manages to convince the developers of such software to implement those new criteria, then of course a lot of people will have the ability to use those criteria. Secondly, that's the researcher side. If the researcher need to upload data, or well, even publication, but especially data to a repository, it's a burden for them. And if we require them to fill in more and more fields and provide more and more data, that will be more and more difficult for them to upload their stuff. So here, I think protocols, pipelines are needed. I don't think that we can ever achieve really good metadata with manual uploading. The key issue is to interconnect different systems and make sure with proper protocols, proper pipeline design, that one system which the researcher uses and produces the data would pass all the required metadata to the repository, and then we will have rich metadata. And of course, the third component is simply know-how. So we, repository managers and the researchers, need to learn about how to comply with those criteria. Thank you.
Thank you, Andras. Gail, do you want to add anything?
I really appreciate your first comment, Andras, and I think this is one place, again, not a paid endorsement, but this is one area where COAR really shines, because, you know, COAR's developed the next generation repositories framework, and I've seen Kathleen at meetings reaching out to the developer communities for different platforms to encourage the incorporation of some of the functionality that we need to, you know, reach these aspirational criteria, some of the functionality that we need in the core software, so that we're not, the responsibility doesn't fall to individual repositories and managers. So I completely agree. And I think COAR is really doing good work to help advance that agenda. I also understand the metadata is hard assertion, and I think, you know, there's some features that are emerging in some repositories, like the ability to import existing citation metadata to populate a submission in progress. And so that kind of interoperability is certainly useful, and interoperability with CRIS systems, I think, would help with that issue. But it's also a place where curation can really help, although I do recognize that that's not an easy lift for any of us who have understaffed repositories. And so I think initiatives like the Data Curation Network, where we're trading expertise among institutions, can be really helpful. And Kathleen should weigh in, I think.
Yes, Kathleen.
Yes, there's also a comment in the chat, or a question in the chat by Michael, so I won't take long, but I think one of the challenges I've noticed in trying to engage with the platforms is that they're being pulled in many different directions as well, with requirements from different stakeholders. So it's hard to get, you know, they have a number of different functionalities that different communities are asking them to adopt in the context of their next version of their repository, and so it's hard for them always to decide which are the functionalities they can put their resources towards or not. So there's challenges there, but I do think that it's important to continually engage with the platform communities to at least let them know what we think are the priorities for those types of functionalities.
Thanks, Kathleen. I completely agree. We have a number of, different rubrics to follow. Let me just, read a comment and a question from Michael Witt in the chat. Such a great presentation, Gail. As a repository manager, building new capacity to address some of these gaps takes resources like everything. The most compelling arguments for investing in them probably come from our researchers and not the library or IT or whoever manages the repository. Do you have any thoughts about how to get our researchers to ask for them, or other idea for making the case to move in these directions?
Yeah, I don't think I have suggestions that are specific to repositories. I think this is something that we're always trying to do with our constituents when it comes to recruiting more resources to support the services and the content that we provide. Just currently at Cornell, there's a faculty task force looking at library support for research infrastructure. There's a university-wide task force that largely didn't touch on the library at all, but there's also a library-focused one. That's a work in progress, so I don't know what will come out of that. But that's the same kind of strategy that we would employ if we were trying to, garner enthusiasm for more money for the collections budget. So if other folks have ideas for how to get support for repositories specifically, I'd love to hear them. I think it's on the agenda for the, Kathleen, I don't know the name of the current initiative where you have national or regional groups around the world addressing current
modernizing the repository network.
Right.
Yeah.
So resources was and visibility and institutional support was definitely one of the areas that program will be addressing.
Let me just take then. Thank you, Gail. I think we have 2-3 more comments, questions here. I can take one other question if you like, and then I think we have enough time. So who says, thanks, Gail. Maybe it's not very relevant, but it is a big news that Cornell just have Folio running alive. Is IR part of it, or is there any future plans of Folio as IR platform?
Yeah, no plans that I know of. I don't think Folio is built for that purpose, but in terms of unified discovery, we handle that a different way. We have a unified discovery layer for our library that pulls in resources from Folio, but it also pulls in resources from our repositories in a single interface. And that's, I think, the right way to do it, because it allows for changes in each of the compartments without having to completely overhaul the discovery interface.
Right. Let me also read the question from Meseret Asefa. Thanks for your presentation. Again, do you have some ideas about metadata interoperability among heterogeneous repositories, such as research data repository and publication management or preprint repositories?
Nothing new, except to use, widely used and recognized metadata standards that facilitate some kind of interchange, or for which there are crosswalks. I think Dublin Core is an example of a really widely used schema that it may not include the specific richness of some of the metadata schemas we see in disciplines, but it certainly would allow for interoperability at a high level. What else? I guess we all submit metadata when we assign a persistent identifier. And so making that metadata as rich as possible, I think, will go a long way towards supporting interoperability.
Yeah, I agree. I will just quickly read comments and a question from Isabel and Eloy. Isabel Bernal says, I agree with Andras. Repository software developers have lots of room to make it much easier for repository managers to comply with the hardest criteria. It would be interesting to identify under whose responsibility which criteria fall. Some fall under repository administrators, others under researchers, and others under software developers. And Eloy adds to that, I support Isabel's suggestion. It would be useful to try to identify at what level stakeholder the requirements need to be addressed, maybe a follow-up step on the current COAR work.
Those are fantastic points. Not only incredibly useful, but also when you can assign specific responsibility to platforms and to repositories as services, then I think maybe we can also kind of head off any potential difficulties where some of these rubrics might suggest, you can't use that repository, but actually the matter in question is really the responsibility of a researcher and not the repository.
Okay, let me now move to our second speaker. Sorry, my mouse is just playing. And we will hear Evelin now next from Evelin Arust from University of Tartu. We know that Tartu University has been going through a process of COAR Trust Seal certificate application, and we are just keen to hear about their experience. Evelin, you can.
Yeah, hello everyone.
Yeah.
I will share my screen. Just give me a second. So I hope you can all see my screen.
Yes.
Yes, we do.
Yes, thank you. Yes, my name is Evelin, and I'm the data manager working at the University of Tartu Library. And today I want to share our research data repositories experience with the guided COAR application training. And just to give a brief background, our research data repository is called Datatoi, as we say it here in Estonia, but in English probably it's more suitable to say Datatoi. And it's a general research data repository, which means that we accept data, research data from all the research fields. And as you can see on this picture, we have divided our repository into communities. These are field-specific communities, and with one exception. These field-specific, like these larger communities, are for the data from the University of Tartu. But we also have a partner university, Tallinn University, and they're also represented here as the one of the like the main communities. But inside their communities, there are actually sub-communities which are relevant to their research data. So yeah, maybe it's a bit complicated at the moment, this division here, but that's the way it is. And yes, as you might have guessed, it's Datatoi is managed by the University of Tartu Library. And at the moment, we have only 2 repository managers or administrators, and actually I'm one of them, so no more people than 2. What else? I would like to show you the score that we got from the EOSC Nordic Fair Assessment. As you can see, our F and A score are pretty well, doing pretty good. We could do better, of course, but at the moment, I think we can be proud of these results also. And as you can see, of course, the I and R score needs to be improved, and we are working towards it, and hopefully in the future you will see better results. And maybe you have the question why we decided to apply for this guided COAR application training. Actually, we had this idea to apply for COAR a long time ago. It was probably before my time when I started working at the library. And last September, when there was this EOSC Nordic Fair certification webinar, there was this opportunity to fill the questionnaire to apply for this guided application training. And we decided to fill the questionnaire, and they contacted us and said that we are one of the chosen ones and we can have this guided training. And of course, we accepted it. And we have been working on this, I think, since January or maybe from the last years, at the end of the last year. And what is our goal? Of course, the goal hasn't changed. It's the same at the moment, that we want to become better, to improve our data repository and become better, and to offer our users a better user experience. And of course, there's this little dream of ours that one day Datatoi could be the national repository of Estonia. And if we are certified and we can say that we are a trusted repository, of course, it's way much easier to become this national repository. And on my next slides, I would like to show you what has improved during this guided training. And I will also show our main obstacles, but I will start with the positive things first. So what kind of improvements we have had? First of all, Datatoi now has a clearly stated mission. We didn't have it before, but now we do. You can see it on the slide. Some of our official documents and service agreements were given a second look. They were updated, maybe new agreements also made, and I think it's a positive thing from time to time to update and our official documentation, and thanks to this we have done it. For us, it was maybe a bit surprised that we actually do have a pretty good in-house expert guidance. We have the open science team here, and actually we haven't thought about ourselves that we are good experts, which we actually are, and now we understand it better and we are very proud of ourselves. And it was good to know, to hear that these people from the core trust seal side said that, oh, you already are good experts. And we also have added new obligatory and voluntary metadata fields to our submission form. Of course, it's not sufficient enough yet. It's the main reason maybe is that this is a general submission form, and we do not have them like field or community specific. And it's one of the obstacles actually, and I will talk about it on my next slides. But we have made improvements, and at the moment we are proud of these improvements too. But of course, we will make them more sufficient and field specific in the future. And now let's get to the obstacles. As it turned out, we have insufficient documentation at the moment. We do have a general policy, and this policy is divided into chapters. We have their like mission, collection policy, submission, preservation, takedown policy, and so on, but they are not detailed enough. So we should make them like more detailed, more longer, more understandable, and make them like a separate policies. And we are actually working on those too at the moment. Although we have a pretty good data protection policy, which was good, and we have brought out primary data types also separately, and we have instructions page, which was also actually good. And next ones, we do not have any workflow curation, and it's actually connected to this next point that we have a lack of human and material resources. So we do not have any like research field specific experts that could say that would check the content of these data files and say, yes, these are applicable to deposit on a repository. Actually, all these responsibilities at the moment on the depositors side, we do, of course, check, me and the other administrator, if the metadata is okay, if there's a README file, and we actually check a little bit the data files also, but as we are not like experts on every field, so we always can't say that it's okay. But yeah, of course, if we have noticed any data protection problems and so on, of course, we react to those too. So yeah, and maybe now I move on to the biggest obstacle that I already mentioned, that we actually really don't know what our communities need. We haven't had the chance to map the needs of our designated communities. And as it turned out from this COAR Trust seal guided training, that it's a pretty big problem. And at the moment, what we are doing, we have already made this questionnaire. It's not ready yet, but almost. And to send the discussionaires out and to ask from our these designated communities from different research fields, what are their needs, how we could help them. To provide them a better repository experience and better metadata and better submission forms and so on. But it's like this two-sided thing that we can ask from them, what do you need? How could we help you? But at the same time, they might not know what they really need. And they ask from us what we should do, how we could help them. So I think both sides kind of need to be some clearance, and hopefully through this mapping questionnaire we will receive it. And of course it would be really helpful if Estonia would have this open science policy framework that we do not have right now, and maybe it's like officially made on the national level. It would be more clearer to our researchers what they should do with their research data, how to act, and maybe it would be easier for us to guide them and give some guidance from our side, and also improve our repository. And for the last slide, I actually have added some suggestions for supporting materials when all this COAR Seal guided training takes place. We have asked from some of these materials, and we have received them from this our teachers from the COAR Seal side, and we're very thankful for those materials. They have helped us a lot. But yes, I have listed 4 of them in here, like maybe some good examples from already certified repositories and their stories of best practices. Maybe there's a possibility to have a session with 1 or 2 already certified repositories to share their knowledge and experience while applying for this certificate. Maybe some example materials, how to meet these requirements for sufficient metadata fields. We actually have had this, have received some materials also that helped us, and maybe an example questionnaire, how to map the needs of the designated communities in the best way. And yes, that's it from my side, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Evelin. They were all, interesting points, and it was also interesting to hear the absence of the national open science framework also affects your communication with your audience. That was interesting. Please feel free to put your comments or questions in the chat, or just raise your hand. But we have a few comments and questions in the chat, so let me just read them out first. After just, so when we just started, Alessandro put platforms aren't services without humans. So we all, most of us agree with that. Paul Walk put a comment here. Many repositories have policies about responsibility for content data, terms of use for depositories, etc. But I'm wondering if there is any experience with actually having to implement these policies. For example, in response to a takedown demand, are there any good practice procedures we can share? Maybe if Evelin, either you or anybody else.
I can say that we do not have any, just like we haven't need to take down any data files, so we do not have experience with that. And but of course with this maybe it was a bit down, if there is like data that is not somehow how to say needs to be protected, or the personalities from these data files, that we have had experience with that, and we're working together with the university's data protection specialist on that too. That kind of experience we have had.
Right. Hilary Jones has noted at JISC, the Arust, they have Arust takedown policy, which is obviously in addition to any by individual repositories institutions. And she says we want to provide such assurance for all users. So adding this as an example. So she has also shared the link here if you want to have a look. Paul just adds that a disclaimer is useful legal protection But if the repository has had some illegal content deposited, then there is still a responsibility to deal with. And I agree, actually, I heard, I know those discussions on the repository mailing list. So that definitely comes up in day-to-day work. Alessandra is agreeing with Paul, and the Gail just noted that the Library Publishing Coalition has a shared documentation library, which I have found incredibly useful wearing my library publisher hat. Perhaps something similar for repositories, she says. Yeah, maybe a link actually would be really useful, Gail, if you find and share that with us. Yes, and she did. It's already in the chat. Is there any other comments or remarks from anybody else? Or a question for Evelin?
I just had one kind of follow-up about Gail's suggestion, and I think one of the things with the COAR community framework, which is basically based on a number of other frameworks, and we pulled together the criteria. We identified in our community which ones we thought were most important or critical, and the other ones less important. But one of the next steps for that was to really provide more support for repository managers in terms of how they can implement those criteria. And we haven't done it yet, but that's definitely on a future plan that we have to be able to make the community framework much more useful for the repositories that are trying to use it.
Yeah, I think that's a brilliant follow-up. That would be a brilliant follow-up from this session. She also adds that, a documentation section in particular, which is a member only, COAR member only documentation that could be. Thank you, everyone. And let me just, move to, thanks very much, Evelin. And let's move to our third speaker, Gultekin Gurdal from Izmir Institute of Technology. Gultekin is the most passionate open science advocate actually in Turkey, so I know it quite well because I'm also from Turkey. So he's actively working with all stakeholders to adapt good practices in repositories at the national level, and we thought actually he can give us an overview from the national perspective. So over to you, Gultekin. Actually, your slides, we see the presentation mode, sorry, presenter mode at the moment. So we see your next slide and notes.
Okay.
I think you were able to change that. I really forgot how to fix that. I think we had that before, but
it's okay
yes,
now?
Now it's perfect. Perfect. You go back to your first slide. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ilkay. Thank you very much, Captain, for your kind invitation. I am very happy part of this community always. And then it's very good to share our experience to each other, always very useful. So I would like to give brief information in institutional repository landscape in Turkey. First of all, I would like to start the higher education landscape in Turkey. We have around 200 universities, but more than half of them established recent 15 years. And 129 state universities, 74 is private university. We have a milestone about the open science and institutional repositories, open access. Especially we started very early for the open access and open science issues. We have started with the Spark membership in 2002. And then first institutional repository for official institutional repository 2005. And then first the mandatory open access policy realized by my institution, Institute of Technology, 2013. So we also opened for the all open access journal, open journal hosting service established by TÜBİTAK. This is also very important. Also, we started the project with the Council of the Higher Education, which is called the National Academic Archive Project. Also, another important improvement, Turkey have a national harvesting system, is harvesting for all Turkish universities. Also, 2009, we released our open science policy, mandatory open science policy based on OpenAI model. After that, TÜBİTAK also launched their open science policy. What we have done during these years, we prepared a website about open science, institutional repositories, and open access. We prepared many guides, and then we made lots of presentation, more than 200 presentation all over the world. Sometimes webinars, sometimes face-to-face presentation. We translated many useful documents in Turkish to share the community. We organize workshops, conferences every year, national level. Also, we prepared many brochures and posters, and then we have lots of training programs for the community. One of the important things is the Council of Higher Education Council for the Turkish universities. Turkish universities belongs to the Council of the Higher Education Council. So it was very important to communicate with the Council of Higher Education. We have a good relation with them, and then we prepared some documentation to them, and then they sent to the universities, and also lots of recommendation on this official letters. For example, every year, Council of Higher Education Council collecting data about institutional repositories. Also, they are asking questions to institutional repositories, to the universities. Some of the highlighted elements of their questionnaire is online. We are filling every year. Another important issue, as I mentioned before, Turkish Academic Archive. Turkish Academic Archive is very important. It's harvested institute repositories in Turkey, compliant with the international standards. More than 152 institutions harvesting in Turkish Academic Archive, and then they have around 2 million records. Also, they have some rules about their harvesting system. If you are meet their needs, they are harvesting your system. Your software must be support to OIDC format, and then your OIE URL must be public and work properly. You have to use the UTF-8 character set, and then at this you have to you must complete some Dublin core fields you have seen in the slides. So another thing is Derrick Park project. Derrick Park project is another important initiatives during this open access travel. They are hosting more than 2,000 journals. Also, another important things about the Derrick Park. Derrick Park is one of the biggest data provider to OpenAI. Recent years, we are communicating with the TÜBİTAK too. TÜBİTAK is our national science funder. They established institutional repository themselves, which is called Aperta, but now they are planning to open for all the Turkish universities as a data repository, because Aperta using Invenio as a core, they are built up under Invenio. So, you know, it's a very expensive things to have a data repository. So we are going to use TÜBİTAK as a data repository, national data repository. Some of the numbers I would like to share with you. The Turkish Academic Archive, as I mentioned before, harvesting more than 102 repository, and then we have around 2 million records. Also register 128 repository to open air. Also 164 record for open door, 159 ROAR, and then you can find 109 ROAR map registration from Turkey. If you look at the open door records repository by country, Turkey 7th place. So we have 164 registered repositories in open door. If you look at the open door Turkey statistics, after the open air project, dramatically increased number of repositories in Turkey. So also, as I mentioned before, I'm very happy to work with the COAR, part of the COAR. So we are always try to be in COAR Works. We are the part of the COAR, first member institution in Turkey. So we translated the COAR community framework for good practice in repositories. And then we sent all the Turkish community, all the repository managers this document. And by the way, I text Ilkay because she translated in Turkish. Also, I'm the part of the COAR controlled vocabularies group. Also, Ilkay working for that group. So we are trying to implement in my repository as an example for the Turkish community. So within 1 or 2 weeks, we will finish the implementation of the COAR controlled vocabularies to my institution repository. I would like to share this slide because many of you know it's not easy to take the attention of the faculty members of university management to institution repository. We used to this space more than 8 years, and then just we are collecting their publication, their output, put into the repository, but it's not enough to take their attention. So we changed our repository software with the ETA-G, which is called GCRIS. GCRIS based on the DSpace CRIS, but we added lots of different features to our system. We are using CRIS system, and then we are using as an institution repository. And then GCRIS collecting all the data about the publication. GCRIS also collecting data about the university research ecosystem, awards, projects, laboratory equipments, and then everything about our research ecosystem. Also, we are providing to our researchers bibliometric analysis. Every researcher has their own profile, and then it's very easy to show them lots of statistics about their scholarly output, their research. Also, it's very easy to get lots of different bibliometrics analysis about the departments. So we are providing the university management faculty member level bibliometric analysis, also department level bibliometric analysis. So after this system, we are getting much more attention from our faculty member, not only our faculty member, but also different faculty member from different institutions. So in my opinion, it's very easy to strengthen the institution repositories way of with the different analysis, different bibliometric metrics. What is the challenges in Turkey about the institution repositories? Some institutions don't have any open science policy. Also, it's not easy to find enough specialists working on open science and repositories. It's also difficult to have repository managers. Lack of national open science policy is majority of the universities has open science policy, but we didn't have still a national open science policy. Another thing is policies exist on paper but not implemented in reality, because as I mentioned before, lots of universities has a open science policy because it is a mandate. Council of Higher Education sent a letter to them. They have to prepare their own open science policy, but in policies exist on paper, not in reality. This is the problem. Also, one of the important problems is it's not easy to get the IT support from the university. So its implementation or development of institution repositories is very difficult. Yes, we have problems. We have challenges about institution repositories, but we have opportunities. If you are part of the international community, like COAR, like OpenAir, it's a little bit easier to solve your problems. So, in my opinion, we can't manage all of this hard work without the help of the COAR, help of the OpenAir. So, thanks to these two important organizations, I am very happy part of this two important organization. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gultekin. Yeah, I think the importance of the communities and the strength of them is very important in what we are able to do and what we can actually share. Just to say that obviously in Turkey, the funder policy, the TÜBİTAK policy, and the Higher Education Council's policy is driving what the institutional repositories are doing. So I guess in terms of criteria and assessment, people just look into those things. So Gail has a comment here, and I think sorry, question. Gail is asking, great presentation, and sorry if I missed this, Gultekin, but can you say what you think drove the increase in repositories in Turkey? The number of repositories.
Yeah, as I mentioned during my presentation, engagement of the OpenAir project is one of the important things to increase the increase of the repository. Other things is communication with the Higher Education Council. Some of the countries, lots of things are coming bottom up. Some of the countries, something is coming up to bottom. In my countries like Turkey, if something is coming up to bottom, it's very easy to manage something. So we have a good relation with the Council of the Higher Education Council. We try to explain why open access, why open science, why the data repositories, why the open data is important. We try to explain many years. So we got their support. And then we sent a letter to all Turkish universities. They established open science, open access committees in their universities, and they are started to work. During that days, we organized many training programs how they can build the institution repository. So we choose this space as a national institution repository software 8 or 9 years ago. We support, we are giving support to this space. So also, Ilkay will know, we did many training sessions for the Turkish university. After this effort, number of the institution repositories dramatically increased.
Kathleen, you raise your hand before I give it to you, your turn. Meseret actually has just commented that you see policies, national or institutional, is a challenge for most of us.
Yeah, it's true.
Kathleen, please go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say that I think Meseret's comment is very important. And we see that in many different countries and regions that funders now are starting to come up with requirements for repositories, and not just funders. We had that incident last year of the publishers also coming up for requirements. Plan S introduced requirements for repositories, and what we have done at COAR is respond to those organizations in sort of trying to let them understand what is feasible and what's not feasible from the perspective of the repository community. But I also hope that the COAR best practice framework can act as something where the funders can look at it and say, well, look, there's already these established criteria. There's a huge community behind these best practices criteria. So why don't we just point to the criteria that were developed by the international repository community rather than creating our own unique criteria. So that's what my hope is in terms of how our best practices framework will evolve over time.
Gultekin, do you want to add something to that?
Yes, we work too much to increase the number of the institutional repository, but also we also tried too much to quality of the institutional repository, to increase the quality of the institutional repository. Thanks, Ilkay. Also, thanks to all the good comment about the presentation.
Thank you, Gultekin. Let me just read a couple of comments here, and then we will move to our fourth presenter. Ansi said, they are looking forward to your presentation in the UNICEF Open Access webinar in the Open Access Week. Irina says, thanks, Gultekin, very impressive, great move forward. Alessandro Bianchi says, COAR response to Plan S that deserves in-depth discussion. Maybe, towards the end, we can actually share some of the thoughts on that. Iman says, Iman Abdel Rahman, excellent presentation. It is good to translate the existing documentations into Turkish. We can learn from your experience to bridge the language gap in our Arabic countries. I completely agree. Fatima says, thank you, Gultekin, an insightful presentation on the work in Turkey. And Meseret says, how about thinking of synchronization of the different repositories you have? I don't know what to make of the synchronization, but if you like to add anything to that, Gultekin, we can take a few more words from you. And then,
yes,
yeah.
As you know, I'm working for National Open Access Test for the OpenAir, so we have a good communication with the repository managers, and then we are always telling the repository manager, you should be OpenAir compliant, you should be our national harvester. So this is making synchronization between the repositories. If any repository OpenAir compliant, and if any repository national academic archive compliant, it's enough for the synchronization.
Thanks again, Gultekin. So let's move to our fourth speaker, Ko Sugawara. My apologies for the wrong pronunciation. Ko is from Hitotsubashi University, and our colleagues at Asia OA colleagues actually have been developing a checklist at JP COAR based on the COAR's framework, community framework, and we can't actually wait to hear what's the latest on that work. So it's over to you, Ko.
Can everyone see my slide?
Yes.
Is it
perfect.
okay? Okay,
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Ilkay, for your introduction. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to this session. Sorry, I returned my slide. Please wait a minute. Okay. I'm Ko Sugawara. I work at the Hitotsubashi University Library in Tokyo. Today, I'd like to introduce some Japanese activities related to the COAR community framework. First of all, let me introduce the situation regarding on open access in our country. In Japan, there is a community called JP COAR, which promotes the openness of research results. There are 662 universities and research institutes participating in this country. One of JP COAR's main activities is operation of a cloud-based repository. And there are several issues in promoting open access and open science, such as copyright policy, research data, and so on. So we have also set up working groups and task forces within JP COAR and deal with them together. Next slide is statistics. This is the number of institutions in Japan that have established institutional repositories. As of March this year, 875 institutions have repositories. Please look at the red bar in this graph. The number of institutions using Gyro Cloud is increasing. As I mentioned in the previous slide, Gyro Cloud is a cloud-based repository system and is available for a fixed fee. So even if institutions cannot build their own server and repository, they can publish research output using this system. Look at another figure, 60%. In Japan, an annual survey of university libraries is conducted. One of the questions in the survey is, what issues do you face in learning a repository? In response to this question, about 60% of the respondents said that they faced issues in maintaining operational structure of repository and in clarifying the position of repository project within the university. These answers are a little bit abstract, but in order to increase the significance of repositories within university, we need to evaluate current repository operations and then develop strategies for the future. Now, let's take a look at a tool to deal with this issue. What I'm going to talk about today is divided into 3 parts. As you may know, last year, COAR published a document called the Framework for Good Practices. So we began our work on the basis of this framework. So I will first explain what it is about. Secondly, we have translated the framework into Japanese and then have also developed our own checklist based on it. So I introduced the features of this checklist. And then finally, I have tried this checklist on my university's repository and then show the results briefly. Have you already read this framework? As a quick overview, this framework was published in October last year. It is designed to evaluate the operation of repositories by listing applicable and achievable criteria. With reference to the existing frameworks listed here, COAR community framework has been designed so that it can be used in different types of repositories and in different geographical and thematic context. Let's check the perspectives of this framework. As you can see on this slide, there are 9 perspectives in total. In order from top to bottom, these are discovery, access, reuse, integrity and authenticity, quality assurance, privacy of sensitive data, preservation, sustainability, governance, and then finally others. Under these headings, there are 45 requirements, and among them, 22 items are essential characteristics, and then the rest are desired ones. After this framework was published, a task force was set up within JP COAR, and then its members translated it into Japanese. After publishing this translation in December, we thought it was not enough to translate the framework into Japanese because the framework did not mention the specific realization of the framework. And then we needed to show the way of implementing the framework and the service labels through a checklist. So for this reason, we continued our activity and then we created a checklist which consisted of 69 items. Here is a checklist we created. The top part of the slide is the framework, and then the bottom part is the checklist, our checklist. There are two features. Firstly, we have tried to make the framework as concrete as possible so that the questions can be answered with yes or no answer. Let's look at an example. In 6.1 of the framework, it asks whether if a repository collects sensitive research data, there is a mechanism in a repository to restrict access to authorized users only. We have developed 3 related checks from this single sentence. Specifically, the first one is, does the repository cover the collection of sensitive data? The second one is, does the repository have the ability to restrict access to resources? And then finally, if the repository has the ability to restrict access to resources, what methods can be used to control this? As a result of accumulating such questions, about 70 items are included within our checklist. Let's take another look at the features. Keeping in mind that this framework is used internationally, if there are any circumstances specific to Japan, we have reflected them in the checklist. For example, please look at the red characters. In Japan, there are schemas called JP Core schema and Juni 2 that are differenced when we create metadata. As the overwhelming majority of institutions use these schemas, we have listed them as options in the checklist. Now, I'd like to actually evaluate the repository of my university. But then before that, let me give you a little introduction to my university. Hitotsubashi University was founded in 1875. It has 6 faculties, mainly in the social sciences, and in several indicators, our university occupies a leading position in Japan. Our repository was opened to the public in 2007. Currently, our repository contains around 25,000 research outputs. According to the pie chart below, the publication of university bulletins accounts for more than half of the total. There are nearly 50 staff members in total in our library, and then 2 or 3 of whom are in charge of the repository. Here is the result of the trial check of our repository using the framework and our checklist. I was supposed to find that the result was not so good than I expected. Let me explain some of them. In terms of access, we have not been able to support accessibility for people with disabilities and the way for publishing files of large size. In our repository, any files cannot be combined into a zip file and then can only be downloaded individually. And then in terms of reuse, we have not displayed the Creative Commons license and a list of preferred formats. Furthermore, text and data mining are also not yet supported. So for these reasons, the achievement rate for this perspective is low. In terms of quality assurance, we do not allow external annotations, comments, reviews, etc. on the resources and the metadata. And then finally, in terms of privacy of sensitive data, the repositories we handle in our repository are basically open access, and we do not handle such data. Therefore, our achievement rate was 0%. Or alternatively, it may be better to answer not applicable. Anyway, but by applying the checklist like this, we can understand the strengths and weaknesses at a glance. Why not try such approach to your own repository? Through the framework, we can see global trends in the requirements for systems and operations of open access repositories. And through the checklist, we can make a more detailed assessment, including our own local situation. Through this, we will be able to evaluate repositories objectively in the light of global standards. And I think that it leads to consider the strategy of our repository. Our work has also been developed as an international collaborative activity. In April, we presented a seminar on an approach to analyzing the strengths and weaknesses of a repository using this checklist. In June, we held a discussion with the participants of the seminar to see if the checklist could be developed as Asia-aware initiative based on the English translation. Since July, we have been working on simplifying the questions to enable comparisons to be made across Asia community. Once this work is complete, we plan to launch a survey online. This slide is a summary of this presentation. Today's topic is the core framework and the creation of a checklist based on it. The framework is global, multidimensional, and designed to evaluate and improve repository operations. Using this framework, the Japanese team, embodied this framework in a checklist adapted to our own national context. Having used this framework and checklist, we have found it useful in identifying the strengths and weaknesses of repositories. If we can get more institutions to do this, it will also help us to identify global trends and solutions. Thank you very much for your participation.
Thanks so much, Ko. That's so exciting, actually. I really find this checklist so interesting, and I wonder whether we can all adopt this, into different, languages, and whether we can use it. I will just take one question, and then we'll move to our mentee to be able to get a bit more actually input, from the audience, if you don't mind. But let me just read it. Jagadish Aryal's question. Jagadish says, congratulations, very nice presentation. I have a query with Ko. Could you please mention who is managing the repository, your university or GP COAR? In terms of fund management, how do you manage funds? Do you have regular budget to manage?
Yes, in Japan, each university controls their budget. So JP COAR does not control their budget. Each university controls the budget. So we continue our activity under the decision of each university.
Thank you, Ko. And I hope this answers, Jagadish, your question a bit. And thanks very much again, Ko, for the great presentation. And we are looking forward to hearing more about it in the COAR community. Now we have only 5 minutes, but we really wanted to go through this, mentimeter questions, if you don't mind. I will just put my mentimeter code and the voting link, whichever you want to use, in the chat. So please go ahead either, you know, by clicking on the voting link or go to menti.com and put the code in to answer the questions. Let me also share my screen so that I can talk about it. Right, let me find the right screen. And I'm sorry for the background noises. Right, the question was, have you ever tried to assess your repository according to any of these frameworks? I know this list, these choices don't cover everything, like Gail actually explained to us in her talk. There are many of them, but we try to say whether you are using or tried COAR Community Framework, COAR Trust Seal, Trust Principles. I'm sure there are, you know, national policy requirements that you are actually affected. Funder requirements, publisher requirements, yes, and there are others.
Yes.
Others are also going up now.
COAR win.
No, yeah, we just want to get some input to see what else we can do. And Catelyn, please feel free to jump in any of the interpretation of the.
No, I just think this highlights the point that Gail made at the beginning of the session, that
yeah, exactly.
There are a lot of different frameworks. In some ways they're aligned and in some ways they're not. And so it can be really challenging in terms of what, when you're looking at applying a best practice framework, which one do you choose?
Yeah. Shall I move to the second one, which I can't remember at the moment which question we had, but let me do that. Right. I think these will help us to at least just to summarize, you know, what are those, you know, biggest challenges for you in adhering to these, you know, frameworks. I wonder if you are able to just put your input in. I hope there's no technical glitch in that. Time to evaluate, finding time, staffing capacity, need to migrate from NGR, pre-NGR, fair trust, requires too many resources, technical support for develop, API, digital preservation, interoperability, shortage of technical staff, lack of resources, yes. Some of the requirements, e.g. control vocabularies. Resources, priorities, I read somewhere. Lack of human resources. Which framework to prioritize all contain interesting and useful indicators, but many of them require full dedication to comply with. Yeah. Apathy at national level capacity funding. I think if they don't move that up. Thanks very much for that. Policy and infrastructure, we have a new one. I think this is, yeah, this is more or less what we have got. I'm just definitely the repetitive of human resources and lack of other resources. Let me just move to the third one. Do you think COAR Good Practices Framework is helpful for you to improve best practices in your repository? Just to give us an idea, like yes or no, or you just don't know enough about it, you're not familiar with it. That's great. At least most of us, you know, think that it is helpful. And I really think that, you know, things like, you know, the checklist explained, that really pin it down to the exact, you know, action, how to implement those good practices. So that's just great. And also the four of us, says that they're not familiar. This also, I think, shows that maybe we just need more communication around the good practices framework. In the end, we need to talk about it more and how it can be useful for any of us. Let me move to the next one. I know I'm taking your time from the break time. So we didn't have any no answer. So I guess we can't ask, if not, why. Do you think so, Kathleen?
Yeah,
So,
I think we can move on.
Okay. So this is our last question, but I think anything that you would think that would be most helpful in overcoming these challenges that we all listed during the session or discussed in adopting these good practices, what would really help? I mean, we do say that community helps. We need to talk more. For instance, one of the things I think Evelin, you mentioned that it would be great to hear from other certified repositories, right? Their stories, their experiences. I would say that this is just one of the things that we can list here. But it would be really helpful if you just put your thoughts into this, and then we can just collect them and see which ones are possible, at least at the COAR side, or as a community ourselves we can do something. Let me just read them out as much as I can see. Core functionality in repo platforms and resources would be helpful. Okay. Getting an active local community of praxis. Sharing experiences in different countries. A checklist or priority list for evaluating the repository. A workflow for how others have successfully evaluated this. I'm really curious, especially with the things like JP COAR's checklist. Good details, examples, exemplars, sharing experiences with implementing these things, awareness among policymakers, funders, practical tools, again, checklists, locating compatible partners to collaborate with, especially to broaden who we work with. That's also a good point. Just identifying them as well, I guess, when you say locating. Provide badge or COAR seal rather than self-check. Kathleen, this is over to you if you want to say anything. Examples of repositories that have already achieved this goal: more capacity in NRS and technical knowledge and skills. We need to raise awareness among decision makers on IR. Yeah, I mean, these are all valuable points that I can just say. And thank you very much. So this is still open. So if you want to add anything, please do. Sorry that we just went over the time a bit. At the moment, actually, I'm meeting like 3 minutes into your break time. But I thought in this session has been really good to hear stories from different countries, and also overview that Gail provided us those especially the tabular scene and the coming out patterns between these rubrics were quite interesting. I'd just like to ask Kathleen, if you want to add anything when we are finishing this session.
Yeah, no, thank you very much, everyone. And I think, again, after the experiences last year with pushing back on some publisher proposed criteria for repositories, providing input to consultations of some funders who were looking at developing repository criteria. I just think it's very important for us to be in this space because we represent a very broad community of, both geographically, but also different types of repositories. And so I feel that COAR should remain very active around making sure that the criteria that other organizations are applying to repositories are valid from our perspective. So thank you very much.